From our studios in Southern California, this is RUNTALK. I'm your host, Dr. Jason Karp. On today's show, we're going to talk about nutrition for female runners. And I just have to get this set up. Okay, we're live on Instagram and on Facebook. So welcome to everybody. Today's show, we're going to talk about nutrition for female runners. You may be familiar with my book that was published in 2012, Running for Women, that I co-authored with Dr. Carolyn Smith, elite ultramarathon runner and sports medicine physician at Marquette University in Wisconsin. And so, I've been interested in female physiology and women's running for a very long time. And, women need a lot of things, both in training as well as in nutrition, that men don't necessarily need to attend to as closely as women do. And so I wanted to devote today's show to all the female runners. And so I'm going to list a number of nutrients that female runners need, more so than men, and we'll get into a little conversation about each one. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. So one of the first issues with women that men never really have to deal with is the issue of bone density. Women start out with a lower bone mineral density than men, and their peak bone density never gets to be as dense as their male counterparts' bone density. And so because of that, there are both training and nutrition considerations. I had a whole other episode on training. I forget which episode. This is our 40th episode. I'm happy about that. Woo-hoo! But go back on my website. You can get the talk that I gave about training for women. But today I want to focus just on the nutritional aspect. And so calcium is one of the more important nutrients for women to attend to the bone density issue. If you look at a lot of younger runners, college runners, a lot of them have stress fractures. And a lot of that can be avoided if the coaches as well as the athletes themselves know about what's going on with their bone density. Most people never get their bone density assessed, and if there is reason to believe that you could be at risk for a stress fracture, then it's important to get bone density assessed. And so calcium is a big important nutrient for female runners. And so how much calcium do women need? Well, it depends on the woman's age, depends on a lot of factors, including their current bone density. But in general, women need about 1,000 milligrams a day between the ages of 19 and 50 years. So up until menopause, women need about 1,000 milligrams of calcium per day. And then that number increases after menopause, because estrogen, and we talked about this on one of the other Run Talks, estrogen has the biggest impact on bone health than anything else. And so once women reach menopause, then they lose the protective effect of estrogen. Estrogen decreases after menopause. And so need to increase other things that affect bone density after menopause. And so calcium is one of those things. Everybody knows. We know from the time that we're children, we're all told that calcium is important for bone health. So about 1,000 milligrams per day of calcium from ages 19 to 50, and then 1,200 milligrams a day for women age 50 plus and postmenopausal women. And so calcium, as we all know, everybody knows, calcium is essential for bone health. It prevents bone loss and reduces the risk of stress fractures in women, especially when they're increasing their volume. So what happens with calcium is that when calcium intake, when you don't consume enough calcium in your diet, then your body will actually steal calcium from the bones to make the level normal in the blood. You always have a certain amount of calcium in the blood. If you've ever done a thorough blood test, one of the things that they'll measure is calcium in the blood. And so if your intake of calcium is not enough, then your body will actually steal some calcium away from the bones to maintain its level in the blood. And so you don't want that, because then that can contribute to osteoporosis. So you definitely don't want to be taking calcium from the bones to supply it to the blood. You have to make sure you have enough calcium in your diet. Okay? And then, as most people know, good sources of calcium are in dairy products, milk, yogurt, cheese. But there's also other, for a lot of people who don't have dairy in their diet or minimize the amount of dairy in their diet, Then there's a lot of other good sources of calcium. Spinach, yum. I used to love spinach when I was younger because I watched Popeye. And so I used to think if I eat spinach, I'm going to get stronger like Popeye. Spinach is a good form of calcium, good source of calcium. Kale and broccoli are all good sources of calcium. Okay, so number one nutrient, a very important nutrient for female runners, calcium. Make sure you have enough calcium in your diet to protect bones, especially postmenopausal women who don't have the bone protective effect of estrogen anymore. And then along with calcium, another nutrient that's important for female runners is vitamin D. Vitamin D helps aid in the absorption of calcium. And so how much vitamin D? Well, it's the same thing with calcium, that the value increases. The amount of calcium that women need to take increases after menopause for the same reason that you need to increase your calcium intake. So about 600 international units of vitamin D for ages 19 to 50, and then over 50 and postmenopausal women, 800 to 1,000 international units per day. So it increases about 200 to 400 international units per day once you hit 50 years of age. So vitamin D aids in the absorption of calcium, and it also increases resorption, so that calcium from old bone is used to make new bone. Okay? So we actually use the calcium to take the calcium from the old bone and replace it with new bone. Bones are very they're constantly going through a cycle of absorption, resorption phases, and you're constantly turning over the bone cells. Bones are a very dynamic process. We think of them as hard, static structures, but they're actually not. Bones are constantly changing. The bone density and cells of bones are constantly changing throughout your life. We have osteoblasts, which break down bone, or and osteoclasts, which create new bone. And so we're constantly going through this, this process of breaking down bone and building new bone, and breaking down bone and building new bone. And so that's why it's very important for women to have enough calcium, enough vitamin D in their diet. And then most of the vitamin D that we get is actually through the sun, as most people know. But we're all told to wear sunscreen when we go out to run, but this is in one instance in which you don't want to wear sunscreen, because sunscreen will actually block the absorption of the sun's rays into the skin. So at least for a few minutes per day, it's good to have direct exposure to the sunlight to absorb the sun's rays and create, your skin will make the vitamin D from the sun. Okay, the skin actually will synthesize vitamin D. So good sources of vitamin D, fortified foods and fatty fish. This is good if you love fish. Fish is a good source of vitamin D. But it's much easier, this is in one condition in which it's easier to get the vitamin from a supplement rather than from food. Unless you eat a lot of fish, or unless you eat a lot of fortified foods that are fortified with vitamin D, then it's better to get it from a supplement. So vitamin D3, look for vitamin D3 in the supplement. It's the best way to ensure you're getting enough vitamin D if you're lacking it. With all of these nutrients that I'm going to talk about today, that you would need to have a documented deficiency, really, in order to supplement with a supplement outside of food. If you don't have a documented deficiency from a blood test, then you just need to make sure you get enough of this in your diet. You don't need to take an outside supplement unless you cannot get it from food, unless you don't eat a certain family group that is rich in those vitamins or minerals. Then, like in the case of vitamin D, if you don't get enough sunshine, if you don't eat fortified foods, then taking a supplement will be the most effective way to get the vitamin. Another important one that I've spent a lot of time on in my coaching career is iron. And so iron, as some people know, not all runners know this, but it's an important component of hemoglobin and myoglobin. So the heme portion of hemoglobin, that's what it refers to iron. And so hemoglobin and myoglobin transport oxygen in the blood and muscles, respectively. Hemoglobin transports oxygen in the blood, and myoglobin, myo refers to muscle, and yo, that refers to muscle. Myoglobin transports oxygen inside the muscle. And so when you're lacking in iron, that will affect your ability to transport oxygen. And as runners all know, oxygen is king. You have to be able to transport oxygen, because if you can't, or if you decrease the ability to transport oxygen, what's going to happen to your ability to run? It's going to go down the toilet. And so a lot of women will start to feel lethargic during hard workouts or during races. And so one of the first things to think about, if you have a string of bad workouts, a string of feeling lethargic during workouts, then one thing to check is ferritin, which is the iron storage capacity in the blood. That gives you an indication of how much iron is in the blood, stored as ferritin. There are other things you can look at, total iron binding capacity. There's other things in the blood that they can check for that tell you your ability to absorb iron, how much iron is in the blood. There's a number of different things that you can look at. Total iron, ferritin, iron binding capacity. There's like 3 or 4 different factors that you can look for in the blood to give yourself an indication of whether you're absorbing iron enough and transporting iron as part of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin alone, hemoglobin concentration in the blood alone does not indicate whether there is low iron. It can be, if hemoglobin is low, that is one indication, but hemoglobin concentration can be normal even if ferritin is low. And so you have to check for all those other things. So iron is very important. Women need 18 milligrams a day of iron. And so when you look at food labels, it all says this stuff. It'll tell you, the amount of milligrams. It'll tell you the percentage of the recommended dietary allowance, the RDA. So look for that percentage of the RDA. Look for the actual number of milligrams or international units, depending on the vitamin. Some different units for different things. But look at the label, because that will tell you how much of it you're getting per serving. You always have to calculate per serving, because all those numbers on the label is per serving. So the serving is 8 ounces of liquid, or 1 cup, which is 240 milliliters if you're doing it in terms of milliliters, or 1 cup, or 16 ounces. It's different units for different things, but you may have to calculate. If you have 2 servings, then you're getting double the amount of what it says on the package, on the label. So make sure you do. It's just very easy, 3rd grade math, to figure out exactly how many milligrams you're getting for, per serving of that food item. And so a big thing with women is anemia. Anemia literally means lack of blood flow. And so, but it's really because of lack of iron, lack of oxygen flow to the muscle and to other cells. And so it's pretty prevalent. Over the course of my 25-year coaching career, I've had a lot of runners, a lot of female runners who have become anemic. And it can really mess with your running performance and how you feel. And so it's also bad for your health, because obviously we need to transport oxygen everywhere, not just our muscles when we run, but we need to, all the internal organs need adequate oxygen. And so becoming anemic, decreases the ability to transport oxygen in the blood. So iron is a very important nutrient for female runners. And there's a few ways that women can lose iron or not get enough of it. One is not getting enough in the diet, like maybe a vegetarian doesn't get enough in the diet. There's a lot of female runners that don't eat meat, which is perfectly fine, but you have to make sure you get it from other sources. And so one way to become anemic is just simply not taking in enough iron through your diet. And another way is by losing iron. And that can happen a couple of different ways. One, maybe your body, there's something that's going on inside your body that you have a decreased ability to absorb the iron that you're consuming. It could also be that you lose iron through either the menstrual cycle, the period. Women who bleed a lot every month, they lose iron, they lose hemoglobin, they lose iron. And then also from what's called hemolysis, which is the breakdown, the lysis of heme, the lysis of red blood cells. And so for women who run a lot, every time you land on the ground, your foot lands on the ground, there's actually a small degradation of red blood cells. And if you're running a lot of miles per week, then there's a lot of degradation of blood cells. And so from that constant pounding on the pavement, it's called hemolysis, the lysing or the cutting or the breaking down of red blood cells. And so you can lose iron through hemolysis. So women have, the major way that women will lose iron, of course, is through their period, during the menstrual cycle. And that's why anemia is so much more common in female runners than it is in male runners. Male runners can get anemic too, but they don't have the menstrual cycle, so they don't have this monthly loss of blood the way women do. And so that's one thing to really be concerned about and make sure to stay on top of how much iron you're intaking to offset what you're losing every month. Okay, and great sources of iron, as we already mentioned, dark meat, red meat, and dark poultry. And so if you're a vegetarian and you don't have meat, then you have to look for it from other sources. So dried fruit and dark leafy green vegetables, beans, whole grains, all of those things are rich in iron. And then also consume vitamin C while you're taking those other foods, because it turns out that vitamin C increases the absorption of iron from food. So it's a nice little trick there, is to consume vitamin C while you're consuming these iron-rich foods. So that's iron. I wanted to spend a little time on that because that may be the most important nutrient for female runners, is iron. Then another one is the B vitamin family. So we have B12, B6, folate, the B complex vitamins. And B vitamins work a lot in metabolism. They're called cofactors. And so, as we all learned in high school biology class, enzymes catalyze the chemical reactions in metabolism. But some of these enzymes need some help. And they get help from a cofactor. And the B vitamins serve as cofactors, which basically assist the enzymes in catalyzing or speeding up chemical reactions. So if you are deficient in one or more of these B vitamins, it basically slows metabolism. And if you slow the rate at which these chemical reactions occur, then you slow the rate at which we regenerate energy for muscle contraction. And so B vitamins are very important for female runners. So again, they include the B complex vitamins, B12, B6, thiamine is in there, riboflavin is in there, all the things that are on, if you read the food labels, you'll see, it'll give like all the micronutrients and tell you the percentage of the RDA. Most people don't pay attention to any of that stuff, but that stuff is important. So niacin is another one that's important. All these cofactors, all these minerals are involved in metabolism. And then vitamin B12 and folate are required for production of red blood cells. So again, very important, blood oxygen transport, protein synthesis, and then also the repair of tissue, because you get microscopic damage from tissue with training. So a deficiency in vitamin B12 or folate can cause anemia. It's another way to become anemic, because again, it affects metabolism, it affects blood flow, red blood cell production. And then, of course, that will reduce your endurance and decrease how you feel. You'll feel more lethargic during workouts. So where do you get these vitamins? Well, B6 you get from fortified cereals, pork, ham, tuna fish, if I love tuna fish, yogurt, milk, chicken, salmon, turkey, bananas, and ground beef. And B12 you can get from clams, oysters, beef liver. I don't know I've never met anyone who eats beef liver. I don't know why that's something. Who eats beef liver? I guess there are some people who eat beef liver. Chicken liver, it's another one, I don't know. I don't think I've ever had chicken liver or beef liver. And folate you can find in dark green vegetables, again, broccoli, spinach, as well as pinto and black beans, and enriched spaghetti. So there's a lot of different foods that you can have to make sure you get the B vitamins and enough folate. It's not that common to be deficient in the B vitamins or folate, but it could still happen. So again, this is important for female runners. Some of the other ones are antioxidants, specifically vitamin C and vitamin E. We already mentioned about how vitamin C helps to absorb iron from foods, and they also protect muscle cells from damage. When you run a lot, there's a lot of oxidative damage. Sometimes they're called free radicals. People have heard of that term, or reactive oxygen species. It sounds like it's from outer space, but free radicals or reactive oxygen species really just means it's a different form of oxygen. So, molecular oxygen is O2. We all know that. You have the little 2 after the O. O2. But when you run a lot, you get other forms of oxygen because they lose electrons, they gain electrons, and so sometimes we have O3 and O4 because there's a lot of aerobic metabolism taking place. There's a lot of use of oxygen, and when we increase aerobic metabolism manyfold, when you're running at VO2 max, you can be 20, 25 times your resting VO2. And so there's a lot of aerobic metabolism taking place, and that will change the species of oxygen. And so we need antioxidants, especially females, need antioxidants in their diet to repair that oxidative damage. Okay? So vitamin C, about 75 milligrams per day, and vitamin E, about 22 international units per day for females. Vitamin C is found in citrus fruits, oranges, things like that, tomatoes, tomato juice, potatoes, green peppers, green leafy vegetables. Vitamin E is found in meat, chicken, fish, and various seeds, vegetable oil, and products made from vegetable oil, like margarine and salad dressing. So there's a wide range of foods that we can also get vitamin C and vitamin E. And now we get to the macronutrients, the carbohydrate, fat, and protein. These are not so much different for women than they are for men, but there are subtle differences. So for carbohydrate, about 2.7 to 4.5 grams per day per pound of body weight, or if you think of it in terms of calories, about 55 all the way up to about 70% of total daily calories if you're training for long races like a marathon or certainly for an ultra marathon. One difference is that when it comes to carbohydrate loading before a race, women not just need to increase the percentage of calories that come from carbohydrate the way men would to carbo load, women also need to increase the total number of calories that they are consuming to obtain the same carbo loading effect as men. So a very interesting subtle difference that women, in addition to increasing the percentage of total calories while they're carbo loading in a few days or the week leading up to a big race, a long race, that they also need to increase the total number of calories that they're consuming, which has a psychological component to it because a lot of women, and men too, but women more so, are much more attentive and much more sensitive about gaining weight. But you have to think of the carbohydrate as your fuel tank. Just like an airplane will fuel up to have a completely full fuel tank before it goes on a long international flight, the same is true for carbohydrate in your fuel tank when you go to the starting line of a marathon or ultra marathon. Even if it means that you gain some weight by adding more total calories in your diet, it's only over a week or several days leading into the race. It's not chronic, but you need a completely full fuel tank when you get to the starting line. You want to be oozing carbohydrate when you get to the starting line. You want your fuel tank to be overflowing with glycogen, the stored form carbohydrate, when you get to the starting line of a long race. If not, then your performance will suffer because once you run out of carbohydrate, you're forced to rely on fat, and then the pace will slow down. So even though women need to increase their total number of calories they are consuming, not just a percentage, it's okay. It's only an acute situation. And so maybe even if you do gain a few pounds, you're going to lose that during the course of the race as the glycogen, as the fuel gets used up. Okay, so right after workouts, simple carbs, sugar, fruits, fruit juice, honey, molasses, dairy products, sweets, to resynthesize glycogen immediately after a workout. But then in terms of long-term, the diet as a whole, nutrient-dense carbs, complex carbohydrates. This is said a million times. I'm not the first person to say this. There's been many people back since the beginning of time looking at what carbohydrate content of the diet should be. Everybody should know this by now. Complex carbohydrates, whole grains, bread, cereals, rice, pasta, vegetables, yogurt, all those things that make up a runner's diet, carbohydrate heavy. Bagels, I love bagels. I'm from New York, I love bagels. Okay, another macronutrient, protein. And again, this is important for women, especially when it comes to repair of cellular damage. 0.5 to 0.7 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day for recreational runners. And it increases from there, about 0.6 to 0.9 grams per pound of body weight per day for competitive runners. And if you think of it in terms of percentage of calories, about 15 to 20% of total daily calories. Plant proteins are less well digested than animal proteins, so keep that in mind. If you're a vegetarian, then you have to, again, monitor your protein intake even more, because plant proteins aren't digested as well as animal proteins. So good sources of protein, we all know: meat, poultry, fish, eggs, dairy products, nuts, seeds, peanut butter, love peanut butter, soy foods, and beans. All those good sources of protein. And of course then fat. Fat also is important as a macronutrient to a female runner's diet, about 20 to 25% of daily calories. So it's equal to, if not slightly more, than the protein intake. Fat, of course, provides essential energy. Our largest storage form of energy is fat. That's why, like in a very long race, like an ultra marathon, you use a lot of fatty acids. So it supplies the largest storage form of energy. Fat helps to produce hormones. Contributes to nerve function. If you remember back to, I don't know if everyone studied this in high school biology class, but nerves have a sheath of fat on them to enhance transmission down the axon. So the way muscles contract and the way neurons talk to each other is through a transmission of a signal down an axon. And then we have the nerve connected to the muscle, which is called the neuromuscular junction. And at that neuromuscular junction, you have this axon, you have that part of the nerve, and you have this sheath of fatty tissue, which is called myelin. And myelin enables the transmission of the signal to go faster down the axon. So basically, myelin allows neurons to communicate faster with muscles, and neurons to communicate faster with other neurons. And so it helps the transmission of the signal. So fat is very important. In fact, multiple sclerosis is a disease in which that myelin sheath is lost. And that's why it affects motor function. It affects the ability to move. So very fascinating. The neuromuscular diseases are very fascinating, the mechanism by which they manifest. And that's how multiple sclerosis manifests itself, by the loss of that fatty acid sheath, that myelin, that wraps around the axon of nerves. So a very interesting neuromuscular lesson here. Neurology, love it. So fat is very important. It also transports the fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin A, D, E, and K. All the other vitamins are water-soluble, but these four vitamins, A, D, E, and K, are fat-soluble. So you need enough fat in your diet to transport these vitamins through your body. So diet too low in fat, which can be common among female runners because a lot of runners want to weigh less to be able to run faster. Again, this is important for men too, but very important for women, especially in a society where there's all this pressure on women to be of a certain body weight, but you have to find what your healthy weight is. And so when women try to lose weight, what food do they try to cut out? Fat. Fat is oftentimes the macronutrient that gets cut from people's diets when they're trying to lose weight. But fat is extremely important as an energy source and to transport these fat-soluble vitamins. And so a diet too low in fat will limit your running performance because it inhibits the fat storage that you have in adipose tissue and the intramuscular fat. We have fat that is contained inside the muscle, within, intramuscular fat, and that's the fat that we use when we run. We don't use the fat from our abdomen or from our ass. You don't use that fat when you run. You use the fat that's physically closer to where it's going to be used, inside the mitochondria. And so intramuscular fat. And so if you limit the amount of fat in your diet, you limit the amount of fat storage intramuscularly, and that's going to affect running performance. So the polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fatty acids are the best ones to consume. Stay away from the saturated fatty acids, which has implications for cardiovascular disease. So a diet that is high in unsaturated fatty acids, polyunsaturated and monounsaturated. So good source of polyunsaturated fats are soybean oil and sunflower oil, and good sources of monounsaturated fats are peanut oil and olive oil. So do a lot of cooking with these different oils to get the fats. Okay, also fish. The oils that come from fish is very good as well. So there is a pretty much complete list of the most important macro and micronutrients for female runners. Again, going back to the beginning, I spoke about bone density is huge. That has to be attended to with female runners. So enough calcium, enough vitamin D, and then iron is also huge. Those are probably the most two important. The calcium and vitamin D for bone health, and iron to prevent anemia and help with the blood and oxygen flow to the muscles. So again, my book, it's my show, so I can promote my book as much as I want. This book came out in 2012, 9 years ago already, Running for Women, which I co-wrote with awesome Carolyn Smith, who is an elite ultramarathoner, sports medicine physician at Marquette University. We wrote that book together back in 2012. So all the information is in the book. You can get it on Amazon or the publisher, Human Kinetics. And so that gives you a whole list of the most important female nutrients. And so at the end of every show, I like to finish with a thought since it's going to be a week since I see you again. And so today's thought I want to share with you is patience. You know, I've been struggling with patience for a long time, but running, it forces you to become patient because you don't see results right away unless you're a brand new runner. Brand new runners will see results right away. But if you've been training for any length of time, then the increments in improvement get smaller and smaller as you get faster and faster. And the training process is long-term. To be a distance runner, it's a long-term training process. You have to lay down all the bricks to build the house to its highest point possible. And so try to be patient and learn from running to be patient and have that convert to other areas of your life. You know, even right now, I know myself, I'm going through things right now that I'm anxiously awaiting and I'm trying to be patient for. But I keep reminding myself that good things will happen. If you wait and adhere to the process, then you'll get the result. You'll oftentimes get the result that you want if you work the process. And that is true in running as well as in life. And so my final thought of the day is to use running to become more patient and understand the purpose of the process. So thank you very much for coming. My name is Dr. Jason Karp. Come back next week for another episode of RUNTALK. Have a great week, everyone.